The chair of the House Judiciary Committee is giving the Attorney General one more chance to comply with a subpoena or face sanctions. Joining us now from Rhode Island, Congressman David Cicilline, a key member of the committee and of House Democratic leadership. Congressman, your committee has given Attorney General Barr a deadline of 9 a.m. tomorrow to turn over a fuller version of the Mueller report as well as underlying documents. One, has there been any progress? Have you gotten any response from the Attorney General? And two, if you don't by 9 a.m. tomorrow, will your committee vote to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress?
Well, good morning, Chris. It's good to be with you. The chairman of the committee conveyed to the Attorney General some additional compromises and said, produce all of the documents, but prioritize those that are referenced in the report. Give us an opportunity to see the unredacted version, and gave until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to produce the document. There has not been a compliance yet. We obviously have to wait till the morning to see if the Attorney General will comply. I think if the Attorney General does not, the chairman will ask the committee to move forward with a contempt citation. The chairman has been very patient, tried to accommodate the Attorney General in every way, but the members of our committee need to see the full report and the supporting documents so we can continue to do our work, conduct oversight in a responsible and sober way. So I hope the Attorney General will comply.
All right. Back in 2012, when the House Republicans were in the majority, they voted on the House floor to hold then Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt of Congress for failing to turn over documents in the Fast and Furious case. You walked off the House floor in protest, explaining, quote, "I declined to participate in these partisan political games, which you called an abuse of power." Congressman, aren't you and Democrats now involved in the same political games?
Oh, they're quite different, Chris. In that instance, the White House had already indicated it would produce all the documents, and the Attorney General said the same. The Republicans, nonetheless, wanted to go forward with a contempt citation. It was close to an election. They thought it would be politically advantageous. It was really a stunt. In this case, the Attorney General has continued to refuse to comply with the lawfully issued subpoena. So they're very different circumstances. If Mr. Barr says tomorrow morning, I'm going to produce the documents, then we would not go forward with contempt.
The House case, sued for documents that Eric Holder hadn't turned over. They wanted him to testify, and he didn't testify. I mean, the point is kind of the same, which is the Attorney General refused to answer requests from the House, and the House voted him in contempt. In one case, you said it was an abuse of power. In the other, you're going to support it.
No, Attorney General Holder did testify before Congress, and the White House did indicate the intention to turn over the documents that the Republicans sought. Despite that assurance, they wanted to move forward with contempt. In this case, we don't have that assurance from the Attorney General. Mr. Barr has refused to furnish the documents or to come before the committee. So those circumstances are different. If Mr. Barr agrees to turn over what we've requested in a reasonable way, no one on the committee is interested in moving forward with contempt. We just want the information so we can do our work, so we can do the oversight that our committee is required to do.
Attorney General Barr declined to testify before your committee this week after your panel insisted that he answer questions from staff lawyers in addition to members of Congress. I have a question. When was the last time that a House committee demanded that staff lawyers interrogate a cabinet secretary?
Well, I think the last time was probably during Iran-Contra when the staff lawyers examined Ed Meese and Caspar Weinberger. So, and of course, it happened in the Senate with Dr. Ford. I mean, the fact is the House rules permit this. The committee decides how we will examine witnesses and how we'll collect evidence. A witness has no right to dictate to the Congress how they're going to be examined or how we're going to collect evidence.
So let's go back. In terms of the direct answer to my question, which is the last time that a House committee did this, it was Iran-Contra in 1987, which is, I guess...
I stand corrected. I'm sorry. There were a number of witnesses that were examined during the Clinton email inquiry by the Republican Congress. I don't know if there were cabinet secretaries, certainly the director of the FBI and others. But look, the fact is they're all witnesses, whether they're cabinet secretary or not.
By staff members? I can tell you, we asked the House Judiciary Committee. They say the last time that a House committee demanded that staff lawyers talk to a cabinet secretary was 1987 during Iran-Contra. You're quite right about that. That was 32 years ago. The Christine Blasey Ford case is completely different. First of all, she's not a cabinet secretary. Secondly, she was interviewed by a woman because of the fact that Republicans didn't want an all-male panel to have a bunch of men questioning her. So it really seems that the only two cases that we could find were one, Iran-Contra, and two, during Watergate. And I guess really that's the question, Congressman. Wasn't this an effort by the House Judiciary Committee to make the Russia investigation seem as bad and as serious as Iran-Contra and Watergate?
Well, I do think it's as bad and as serious, but that's not the purpose of asking for staff attorneys to question. Look, it's been done. It's been done to a lot of witnesses. I don't think it matters whether it's a cabinet secretary or a lay witness. The fact is the committee has the right to collect evidence in the way that we think is appropriate. And the reason that it's so critical for a witness like the Attorney General is he's a master at evading. And when you have 5 minutes that you go back and forth, Republican and Democrat, you sometimes can't dig deep enough and really get and have follow-up questions. So we decided it would be much more useful to get the evidence with a staff counsel having an extended period of time to follow up and really drill down so the Attorney General couldn't evade answering questions, as we saw him do in the Senate. So, look, what people should be asking is, why is the Attorney General afraid to come before the House Judiciary? What is he hiding? What is he worried about? What questions is he afraid he can't answer? That's the real question, not
sir,
why does Congress want to ask staff counsel?
He was absolutely willing to testify before the committee. It was just this particular condition.
But why, Chris? I mean, you have to ask why. Like, what is it about
Well, because maybe the fact is that it hadn't happened in 32 years. Let me, if I might ask you, I might ask you another question, sir, just to follow up. The question now is, what is the House going to do about all this? Here is what Attorney General Barr said when he testified before Congress last month.
Reports have emerged recently, General, that members of the special counsel's team are frustrated at some level with the limited information included in your March 24th letter. Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't. I suspect that they probably wanted, more put out.
But after we learned this week that, in fact, Special Counsel Robert Mueller had written long before that testimony, just after the release of the Attorney General's summary, to Barr complaining about his summary, here was the reaction from House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
He lied to Congress. He lied to Congress. If anybody else did that, it would be considered a crime.
You are on the record as saying the House should be prepared to imprison people held in contempt of Congress. Are you really serious that you're going to go down and arrest the Attorney General?
Well, what I'm serious about, Chris, is the Congress has the absolute responsibility to collect evidence, to compel the presence of witnesses to testify under oath. If the executive branch can prevent us from doing that, they will have effectively extinguished our oversight function. So we have to take this in a deadly serious way. We have several ways to enforce a subpoena. The first is to judge someone in contempt and to initiate a civil proceeding. Congress also has the inherent authority to judge people in contempt, and there is both an 1821 and a 1935 Supreme Court decision that recognizes Congress's right to do that. And in both those cases, individuals were taken into custody pending their compliance with the subpoena. It, of course, should never come to that. We expect the Attorney General to honor a subpoena when properly served, and we will fully enforce that through the courts. But the reality is we have to have access to this information. This is central to our oversight responsibilities, and it is not up to the executive branch to decide what they want to give us. Our Constitution requires otherwise.
I got a couple of final questions. There have been new reports this week about alleged surveillance, some would call it spying, by the FBI on the Trump campaign. It turns out that a new person in the FBI or the Justice Department had actually met with George Papadopoulos, continuing questions about the Steele dossier. Attorney General Barr said he is going to investigate the origins of how this whole Trump-Russia investigation began. Don't you think, in the interest of fairness, that your committee and Congress should investigate that as well?
Well, it's laid out in the Mueller report in pretty significant detail. More than 140 contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian officials or people connected to WikiLeaks. We know how the investigation began. What we ought to be focusing on is protecting America from an attack by a foreign adversary of our democracy. And while we're doing that, Chris, it's important to note we're doing this oversight work. But we should not forget that Democrats ran on an agenda for the people of this country to drive down health care costs, particularly the cost of prescription drugs, to raise family family incomes with a real focus on rebuilding infrastructure and to root out corruption in Washington, which is why we passed H.R. 1, the most significant ethics reform since Watergate.
Right.
We passed universal background checks, equal pay for equal work. We've begun to work on prescription drugs. So we're going to get the work done for the American people, but we're also going to do our oversight, and we're going to protect our democracy and hold people accountable who engage in this conduct.
Finally, Congressman, the House Judiciary Committee, your committee, is reportedly in talks with Special Counsel Robert Mueller about testifying before your committee. In fact, has he agreed to testify, and has a date been set?
A tentative date has been set of May 15th, and we hope the special counsel will appear. We think the American people have a right to hear directly from him.
No, let me just interrupt because we're running out of time. When you say a tentative date has been set, has the special counsel agreed to that date?
Well, I think counsel for the special, or the representative of the special counsel has, but obviously until the date comes, we never have an absolute guarantee. The White House has so far indicated they would not interfere with Mr. Mueller's attempts to testify. We hope that won't change.
Congressman Cicilline, thank you. Thanks for joining us
My
today.
pleasure.
Always good to talk with you, sir.
The water's great. Maybe, maybe not. It's a crowded field. 21 Democrats officially in. At least 2 more are expected to join as early as this week, and there could be more after that. But is a growing list of contenders a plus or a minus for the Democratic Party and for the president in the general election? Here to weigh in, former Bernie Sanders national staffer, Cicilline Figueroa. Good morning.
Good morning, Ed.
So, Cicilline, what's your sense? Because I remember back to 2016, and you could play both sides of this, and there were some people saying, oh, the Republicans are going to be so damaged by all these potential candidates, 16, 17 in there. And then maybe it made Donald Trump stronger in the general election. What say you now about 20, 21 or more Democrats?
I mean, the same thing. I think it's a wonderful thing. You know, a lot of these candidates are simply running because in 2016 they were told that they could not. And then, of course, there's a lot of people who are running just simply to boost their name recognition. But I think it's a good thing. I think it's good to see competition. I believe in competition. I think it gives everyone an opportunity to see different policies to distinguish themselves, you know, to see who's really for Medicare for all, who's not, and who actually has a plan. So I think it's a good thing. I'm hoping maybe we can get to 25 or 30. It definitely will be entertaining. We know that for sure.
It will be entertaining. I agree with you on that. But if you get to 25 or 30, and Bill de Blasio here from New York, far on the left, talking about maybe getting in this week as well. Your own party leader, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, is saying, folks, calm down. You may be going too far to the left. How do you stay in the mainstream, as she said, when you have socialists and other liberals tacking the party to the left?
Yeah, I think, you know, what we saw with Bernie Sanders, although it was very popular, had a lot of young voters who wanted to go to the left. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that way in the polls. You know, most of Americans are still moderate. Even me working for Senator Sanders myself, I leaned more moderate. I'm not a socialist. So one of the things that I think progressives certainly need to pay attention to is the people that won the House were those who were more in the center that took those Republican seats. So if they lean too far to the left, which it appears what they're doing, I think that'll be a problem when we look at the general election.
All right, let's talk about Joe Biden then, who as a former vice president is trying perhaps to run as a mainstream candidate, but then said this in South Carolina. Watch.
Last year, 24 states introduced or enacted at least 70 bills to curtail the right to vote. And guess what? Mostly directed at, quote, people of color. You see it. We got Jim Crow sneaking back in. No, I mean it. Why? Because, you know, if everybody has an equal right to vote, guess what? They lose. They lose.
Cicilline, he said he was going to run as a unifier. Now he's talking about Jim Crow.
Well, you know, one of my issues, and I think everybody loves Uncle Joe, just who he is as a person on Democrat or Republican side. But for him to be talking about Jim Crow, and when he was the one that implemented the crime bill, which was worse than Jim Crow when it comes down to what it's done to my community, particularly my generation, with locking up more black men in prison than those who were enslaved in 1850. So he has a lot of explaining to do, and it's going to go a little bit deeper than just, you know, the right to vote. So I'm looking forward to hearing what he's going to do to actually fix that plan.
Worse than Jim Crow. Some strong words this morning. Cicilline Figueroa, appreciate you coming in and giving your point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you.